This podcast has been produced on the traditional lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal peoples. From 2RPH and the Wicking Trust, this is Passing Thoughts. I'm Rob Caldor. This is the podcast where we explore death, dying, and everything in between. Today's episode is all about the farewell. When somebody dies, things often move quickly from grief to making decisions about how to create a meaningful and fitting send-off. Connie Mason speaks with three amazing women, Eva, Jane and Kathy, who generously share how they navigated saying goodbye to their partners and the choices they made to honour their lives. In our Before We Go segment, Sue and Jeff share how they hope to be remembered when their time comes. But first, our contributor for this episode is Connie Mason, and she begins by speaking with Eva.
If you were to paint a word picture of Frank, what are the first things that come to mind?
Frank was an extremely cheerful and happy person who loved to make people laugh. He had lots of stories that only he could tell because nobody else could tell them quite the same way as he did, and he always had everyone in stitches.
Frank had not left any clear wishes about his funeral.
That's right.
Did you try to talk about it with him ever?
Maybe in the past, certainly not when he was sick, because we didn't expect that he wouldn't make it through the treatment that he was undergoing. It wasn't a matter to raise at the time. We were thinking positive thoughts and waiting for him to get out of hospital, so no, we didn't talk about it.
The news that his illness was terminal came as quite a shock, did it?
Yes.
Did that make it difficult for you to decide what sort of funeral was right? I mean, you would have been in deep shock yourself. It was sort of a bit of a fog at that time.
When we were told that there was nothing the doctors could do for him and that he only had a matter of days left, even though Frank wasn't religious, I made the decision to call a very good family friend of his who was a Catholic priest, and I asked him to come and read Frank's last rites to him, which he did. Frank had been basically unconscious for a day or so before Father Pete came along, and the only words he said in those last few days were, "Oh dear God," when Father Pete was holding his hand and giving him his last rites. So then I knew that Father Pete had to be involved in the funeral some way. So there was already that thought process going on, but I really didn't start doing anything or thinking about it in any depth until after Frank had passed. I spoke with Frank's children, and they initially wanted a low-key affair, something probably quiet, private, just the family. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that Frank actually needed a bigger send-off. And part of the reason for that was because he had been in the police force for 40 years. That was his second family, and it was an important part of his life. Frank also liked a little bit of fanfare. He liked to be the centre of attention. So I thought that having the police involved some way in his send-off would be the right thing to do for Frank. And I contacted the local area commander, superintendent that Frank had worked with in the past, and I had met her, and she suggested a guard of honour.
Wow.
No less. So that was the starting point of thinking, well, how are we going to arrange this? The police have a tradition of not only a guard of honour, but they also usually have a senior officer reading a valedictory, which sets out the history of service of the police officer who's passed away. And on this occasion, we actually had a young constable who had worked with Frank present that. Because she'd worked with Frank for a couple of years and knew his sense of humour, she actually added quite a lot of personal information about some of those things that he had achieved during the police force. So that was a wonderful way of, again, respecting him. Instead of just a black and white, this year he did that, that year he did this, she put a personal touch to it. The other thing that Frank loved was the bagpipes, and he had played them himself when he was at school and for a few years after. So through the police connection, I organised a piper as well. So it did turn into a big affair in the church. Though it wasn't a full-on Catholic service, Father Pete is quite good at adapting ceremonies to the people involved. I mean, it did have the seriousness of a send-off for a senior police officer, but it was also not over-the-top religious type.
So after the service, Frank's coffin stayed in the church?
No, the police carried the coffin out and put it in the hearse, and then the piper actually, and I didn't know he was going to do this, but he walked in front of the hearse down to the first set of lights and piped Frank
where was this?
away from the church in Waverley.
Wow. Stop traffic.
Yes.
Frank stopped traffic. Well, he's done that before as a policeman.
That's right.
So in that fog and grief, that sounds like an awful lot to organise.
It was a lot, but I've had to do it in the past for my parents and my sister some years ago, and especially with me, this thing kicks in where your emotion gets put aside a bit and you just focus on, I have to get this done and I have to get it right. And at the wake, I had a few other people speaking. That was a more light-hearted group of eulogies compared to in the church. It was a little bit more sombre.
Solemn.
Yeah.
Were you happy to have that clean slate, or would it have been easier if Frank had given you more guidance before he died?
I think that he probably would have asked for something similar anyway. And I guess I knew him well enough that it just made sense to me to...
And as you said, he had two families, the
Yes.
police force being one of them.
Yes.
And thinking back to his funeral and his wake, what was the most meaningful part of that day for you?
The way the police embraced him on the day and acknowledged his service, and the way so many people came who he knew and they all loved him. It was just a real tribute to him. I think it was nice having the solemnness at the church followed by the more light-hearted. We had some extremely funny stories told about Frank. Yeah, it was a much lighter, happier celebration of him.
Yes.
Yeah, afterwards.
It was a really nice contrast to the solemn occasion in the church.
Yeah.
Jane and Rick had been married for 15 years when Rick was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. For 6 years, Jane walked a path beside him, providing tender, day-to-day care at home and then continuing that deep commitment when he moved for the last 4 years of his life into nursing care. I know there's a lot to say after 22 years, Jane, but when you think of Rick, what is the first memory or quality of Rick that makes you smile?
His gentleness. He was a very gentle person and very thoughtful. He never said anything without giving it deep thought before he spoke.
Yes. When Rick died, you didn't have a roadmap or any kind of blueprint about what he might like as a funeral or any kind of celebration?
Not totally. I knew that he was not religious, and so I knew that he wouldn't want all the sort of bells and whistles and pomp and circumstance that you get in, say, a church funeral.
Do you think it would have been easier if you knew?
As it turns out, probably not, because I didn't know what my options were and Rick didn't know them either. So we might have actually come up with something that would have been less than as lovely as it was.
So in some ways you think it was easier to have a clean slate at that point?
Only because we would, if we'd had a discussion, it would have been only what we both knew was possible without thinking outside the box, and I might have done something to honour that conversation.
So it really was left for you to decide the type of funeral that would best reflect Rick's life and values, but it was at a time when your capacity to think clearly is probably at its lowest.
It's very hard. I mean, I went into it thinking that I knew what I was going to do, but that I didn't really want to do what I believed I had to do.
So walk me through what happened.
Well, I believed that I would have to do something like I did for my mother, or my sister and I did for my mother, which was to have a very low-key service in a crematorium where the coffin would be sitting there and we would all be sitting in the pews and several people would get up and speak, and then the coffin would slowly disappear into some furnace or something or another. And I found that very troubling.
So how did you finally decide what you wanted to do for Rick, Jane?
Well, I went to the funeral home with a friend because I couldn't bear to go on my own. And we were sitting outside afterwards, and I said I was really not very comfortable with the whole idea of this cremation. And she said, well, you can have an unattended cremation. And I said, oh, what's that? And she said, well, they'll cremate the body and then you get the ashes and then you can have a wake, basically, a celebration of life, whatever you like. And this was a real sort of aha moment for me, because I thought, then I could hold it near the water somewhere, because Rick was a hobby sailor, and I thought I could maybe hold it at a sailing club or a restaurant on the water. And so that's what I started to look into.
So that seems like something that you could really tailor to remember Rick in the way that he was known to so many of his friends. He loved the water, he loved sailing, and it gave you some peace of mind not having to go through those aspects of a cremation that you found difficult.
I managed to avoid all the worst parts of it in a way, which I think Rick would have wanted anyway.
So you then went into the funeral parlour, and was it easy to explain what you wanted to the person?
Basically, I didn't want any of the bells and whistles that the funeral home wanted. I just wanted them to cremate him and then give me his ashes. It's obviously not necessarily something the funeral home is going to recommend to you, because obviously they want to sell their services. So it's something you have to be fairly proactive about, I think, if it's something that interests you.
So having decided that you wanted an unattended cremation for Rick, was there anything else that you had to decide?
Well, the funeral home asked me what kind of an urn I would like, and I really didn't know at that point. And also, Rick had 2 adult children living in the US who were not able to attend, or any of his other family. So I wanted to have them put into 2 separate containers. This all seemed very complicated, and he said, you don't have to decide right now. I can put them in 2 cardboard containers, and one of them will be one that you take back with you when you go to the US, and the other one you can use to spread here. And as it turned out, I picked up the ashes a couple of weeks later, and they were very kind about holding them for me because I didn't want them in the house. And I picked up these 2 like poster cardboard rolling things, and I ended up sending one of them back to the States because I decided I didn't want to travel with them. And that was actually really easy to do, and the post office was really supportive and helpful.
That's a really practical solution for something that you wanted to do for his family. Then you went on to organise Rick's wake, and you had an idea of what that should be. Can you tell me what you decided finally?
I looked at several sailing clubs and a couple of rowing clubs locally, and my main concerns were things like accessibility, because there were a couple of people who didn't walk well, and I wanted to make sure that I could get it catered and that it would have a licence. And I ended up choosing a location that was just stunning and beautiful views of the water, and it felt just right, and they were very helpful.
What was the most meaningful part of the evening for you?
Having all my friends and all Rick's friends together. It was a beautiful night. We lucked out on the weather. Everything just was perfect, and having people say such beautiful things about him. But the other thing is that my nephew videoed the whole thing, and that is a memory something that I have that I was able to send to his kids as well, so that they were able to experience his celebration of life, even though they weren't able to be here.
And was there a part of the evening that was difficult for you?
Not really. I was a bit nervous before I spoke because I had got a speech of my own that I was going to say. But once I started talking about him, it was almost as though he was alive again. And I didn't feel sad. I just felt really happy to be able to share memories that I had with all these people who cared about him. And the thing is, some of them hadn't known him very well. They were there because they supported me. And so people said to me afterwards they felt they'd met him, they felt they knew him. And that was very special too. I also created a series of photographs that were shown on the screen as well of various times, right from when Rick was a little child all the way through to his Parkinson's disease.
You still had an enormous amount to organise, didn't you?
I did, but at the same time, I think it really helped me. It helped me to process it, it helped me to grieve, and it gave me something really constructive to do.
Kathy and Bill had been married for over 30 years when they were faced with Bill's diagnosis of lung cancer. Over the next 2 years, Kathy became the heart of a devoted circle of support, including their own end-of-life doula. Together they guided Bill through his illness with unwavering tenderness and advocacy. Bill's wishes were granted when he was able to die at home 2 years later, surrounded by love. Kathy, you were married to Bill for a long time. Can you tell me a little bit about Bill and your life together?
We met when we were very young, age 19, and we actually met Commonwealth Bank Teller Training School, of all places. But anyway, we clicked. He was always involved in things and wholeheartedly involved, and sometimes he'd burn himself out of that particular thing and then he'd move on to the next thing. He always had a love of music right through his life, loved his family. And nature was a big influence for him too. We eventually left the city and settled on our 20 acres of bush.
Wonderful. But you didn't have long together there.
We bought the property in 2008 and it wasn't till 2015 that we actually finished a house there and could live there. And then he died in 2023. So we had 8 years there.
Oh, okay. But from the time that Bill was diagnosed, you did engage a death doula, is that right?
Yes, so that was, she came and we met with her quite a few times just round the kitchen table and walks through the bush and whatnot at the start. It was all about education at that stage and understanding what was going to happen and how we could perhaps make some plans to make it work best for Bill. And it was also about educating the family. She was really good. We had some Zoom meetings with her where we brought in extended family. Bill's one of 5 siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a special session just with our grandchildren and our daughters, their mothers, so that the grandchildren could ask their own questions and get their sort of, you'd like to say it, of what was going to happen to their grandfather.
What was the role of your doula when it came to planning Bill's funeral?
She introduced us firstly to a funeral company that was holistic, and they were the ones that enabled us to keep his body at home for a few days after he died. So we had a number of small events after he died, and all of this planning took place prior. So he and I went and met with these funeral people, and we ended up having a lovely vigil there. But what you would probably equate to the actual funeral would be, we had a big celebration at our property, and our doula was very involved in organising that and then actually being the MC on the day.
How was that different to having a normal MC, having your doula there?
By this stage, we've formed a very strong relationship and we know each other very well. And so you're not the widow or the person organising the celebration. I'm not walking in cold to a funeral director's setup and having my first interview with a person I've never met. It made a huge difference. I could put forward ideas that I had for what I wanted to include in this celebration, and a casual call. Oh, Helen, I've thought of something else. What do you think about this? Could we do that? Oh, well, we could slot that in here, and just made the whole process very easy.
Yes. Her experience with the industry, was that valuable to you?
I think just her knowledge of what was possible, her knowledge of options that we could consider. Have you thought about this? You could do this. I think one of the biggest things that she helped us with was that there's no rules. You
Right.
don't have to follow what is the norm. Oh, the person died. Oh, we've got to whisk them off to the funeral first, or the parlour or whatever, and we've got to put something in the paper, or we've got to have a service within a week. There was all of that was taken away. I
Mm.
think that was really, really beneficial.
So she was able to offer you advice and guidance, but also reinforce your wishes as something that was feasible and practical. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I'm still in touch with her now. So, this is like we're, heading up to the 3rd anniversary this year. And so, there's still a phone call and check in, and just someone that you really know quite well now and who knows your story and your background and can just pick up a conversation with you if you've got a concern, or you just want someone outside the family to have a bit of a chat with. Grief is a very interesting journey. It's just a state of being that I'm in now. If I can't speak to my daughters, or I want someone else to talk to, I've got her to talk to.
And is that normal for a doula to offer support, grief support?
They can work with a person or a dying person and the dying person's family. They can work with them right from the diagnosis or even prior with end of life planning, right through to this grief and bereavement stage. Some people may not want that, or they might just want the doula, to help them at a particular point along the way. But the fact that they can stay, I think that's their point of difference. The fact that they can be the person that is a continual presence right through. That's what's special. An individual doula may not do that for every client, of course.
Right. What was the most important part of her involvement?
I think the education part, when we first got this diagnosis of you've only got 6 months to live if you don't do some treatment. So we did some treatment and he got 2 years. But in that time, we learnt so much about ourselves, about coping with something like this as a family, and like the education has just filtered out now through our family and our extended family and into our community, because I'm not backward in talking about any of it. So I've been able to say to people, well, did you know you don't have to have a funeral, you can do something in the bush like we did.
And it was her that helped you. Did
yeah.
she help the day run smoothly?
I'm a bit of an organizer, so when we have family events, it's usually me that's saying, oh, we'll do this next, and now it's time to do this. And well, I just did none of that. She did all that on that day.
Was there anything you would have done differently, Kathy, looking back?
Perhaps we might have had conversations earlier when we were actually well. That's something you learn now in hindsight, that anybody can start these conversations about their end of life at any time. You don't need to wait till you've got a terminal diagnosis. So perhaps we might have had more. We did have some documents in place. We had wills and different things, but we hadn't really talked about if I'm dying, what would we do?
If somebody is facing end of life of a loved one, would you recommend that they do consider working with an end of life doula, particularly around the funeral stage?
I'd recommend a doula at any point, even having an initial conversation, and then it just opens up this whole world. But yeah, it was wonderful to have her as our, in inverted commas, our celebrant, for want of a different word, on that day. Yeah, It was a beautiful day. I don't know, that everything was smiling on us that day. It was beautiful blue sky, sun, and everyone wore their Hawaiian shirt. That was Bill's request.
Thanks to Iwa, Jane and Kathy for generously sharing their stories, and thank you Connie Mason for bringing them all together. Before we go, people often use the phrase "at one with nature." Jeff and Sue have decided that when their time comes, they want to make that idea a reality.
It's essentially an area designed to become a forest, which is in Badella on the south coast of New South Wales. And a young couple who are locals decided this is something they wanted to do, to create a natural burial ground that could ultimately become a forest.
We had been talking about what would happen to both of us, because I'm from New Zealand and Jeff's from Australia, and where we can't sort of bury halfway between the two countries. But I was reading a magazine and came across an article on this natural burial ground, and I thought, that solves all the problems.
We had been examining it for a while because we're both widowed in a sense. Sue in 2010, me in 2014, and both my late wife and her late husband were just converted into ashes and spread around. And so there was no real record of them having been on Earth other than the births, deaths and marriages. And they were like us, they had a strong environmental desire. So we'd been looking for an option, and then Sue discovered this thing. We explored it. It was in the creation stage. No one had been buried there initially. Essentially, as in any funeral directing arrangement, the body's taken to a morgue or to a morgue at a funeral director's place.
We're imagining that first there will be a memorial service with the family and friends in Sydney. They won't be coming down to the burial ground, it's too far. It's not appropriate for a ceremony there or a memorial gathering there. Family, if they want to be there to witness the burial, can.
There will be a plaque. They going to have a board with plaques on it, so at Badella, so they'll be able to see it. And our tree will grow above us.
A spotted gum we will be. I was adamant it would be a spotted gum.
It requires both of us to be buried first, because the process is you're buried in a shroud, nothing else, and a basket, most of which are natural and break down. And you're surrounded by straw and other bits and pieces, and gradually as you, over about 9 months, you break down and become part of the earth. And at that stage, when both of you have had 9 months there, they then dig up above you and plant the tree in above you. But it requires 2 graves for the size of these trees to grow on. And so we'll be a spotted gum between us. My late wife had always said, just plant me and plant a tree above me, really. But then she got cancer and had many chemo treatments, and in the end she said, well, look, I've got so much poison in me, I don't want to be put in that, so burn me, basically. But hopefully I won't have that, so I will be able to just waste away down there and have this gorgeous tree.
I had to climb to the top of Mount Tambo to distribute my husband's ashes because he wanted to be in the trees too. Everybody we speak to say, well, how on earth did you hear about that? What gave you the idea? This is amazing. It's a bit left field for most people at the moment.
There was a really funny moment. We went down to inspect. You don't have this particular site. You're going to be buried in this area. You might be on top of the hill. You might be at the bottom of the hill. But
depends when you die.
And at the end of it, we picked out the tree, and Sue had given this woman a hug, and then said, "I can't wait to die." It is a lovely area.
Passing Thoughts is made possible with the generous funding provided by the Wicking Trust and the invaluable support from the team at 2RPH. Thanks Barry, Marty and Veronica for all your regular support. If you have feedback, topic suggestions or would like to share your own experiences, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at passingthoughts@2rph.org.au. Also look out for our Facebook page, Passing Thoughts. Don't forget to rate, review Passing Thoughts wherever you listen to this podcast. It really helps others discover the show. I'm Rob Caldor. Thanks for listening. I'll be back with our next episode.
This is a Radio 2RPH production.